All right, today we are diving into a really powerful, symbolic judgment from the book of Jeremiah. This was all happening in the final desperate days of the kingdom of Judah. And this isn't just a message that Jeremiah had to say, it's a prophecy that he was actually forced to live out. Now, to really feel the weight of this warning, you have to get the timeline. We are in the last few desperate decades of Judah's life as a kingdom. Babylonian power really starts to take over in 606 BC. Then you've got the first wave of people being deported in 597, and by 587, it's over. The kingdom falls. So Jeremiah's prophecy isn't about some distant, maybe it'll happen threat. No, this is about a catastrophe that is literally unfolding right in front of them. Jeremiah is talking to Judah's final generation. Verse 1 of chapter 16 starts with a classic prophetic phrase. The word of the Lord came also unto me, saying. But this signals something new. Something deeply personal is coming. Jeremiah isn't just being told to go speak a message. He's being commanded to become the message. And this is where it gets intensely personal. The first divine command we see isolates Jeremiah from the most basic, fundamental parts of being human, of being in a community. It turns his entire existence into a walking, talking prophecy. The command in verse 2 is just staggering. Thou shalt not take thee a wife, neither shalt thou have sons or daughters in this place. You have to understand, in that culture, your whole legacy, your social standing, it was all tied to your family. Children were seen as the ultimate blessing from God. So this command, this would have felt like a curse. It was a deeply personal and very public judgment. So what's the point? This isn't God promoting celibacy or anything like that. No, the sources call this eschatological symbolism, which is a fancy way of saying it's a symbol of the end. By forbidding Jeremiah from starting a family, God is living out this devastating message. This nation, right here in this land, has no future. To have kids right now would just be bringing them into a world of certain death and destruction. And verse 3 immediately makes it clear that this warning goes way beyond just Jeremiah. It talks about the sons and daughters, and the mothers that bear them, and of their fathers that begat them in this land. This tells you the judgment isn't just for the kings or the elites. Not at all. It's a total, indiscriminate household judgment that's going to tear through every single family. And the scope of this prophecy just keeps getting wider. It moves from Jeremiah's own forbidden home life to the complete breakdown of the social fabric. The sacred rituals that hold a community together, especially when people are grieving. The imagery in verse 4 is, well, it's stark and graphic. The dead shall be as dung upon the face of the earth. To be left unburied without any dignity was the absolute ultimate disgrace in the ancient world. It was a sign of complete and utter desolation. This kind of language actually echoes the Old Covenant curses for disobedience, and it paints a historically accurate, horrific picture of what happens after a Babylonian siege. So verses 5 through 7, they just detail the complete shutdown of mourning. God tells Jeremiah, don't even go into a house of mourning. There's going to be no lamenting for the dead, no proper burials, no customary rituals of grief. Even the cup of consolation, this drink that was traditionally offered to those who were grieving, even that's gone. The death is going to be so widespread, so overwhelming, that society itself will lose the ability to stop and grieve. And this leads us to this absolutely terrifying declaration in verse 5. When God says, I have taken away my peace from this people, even loving kindness and mercies, it's so much more than just an absence of quiet. It means the very channels for divine compassion, for communal comfort, they're being shut down. The judgment is coming and there's going to be no relief. Okay, so we've gone from the house of mourning, now we move to the house of feasting. This final prohibition strips away even the possibility of joy, silencing the very sounds of happiness and hope all across the land. In verse 9, God commands Jeremiah not to go into a house of feasting because he is about to cause to cease the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness. Think about that. Silencing weddings, the ultimate symbol of a hopeful future, that's the final blow. It means this land is no longer a place for new beginnings. And this prophecy was tragically fulfilled when Jerusalem was left a desolate ruin after 587 BC. So, after hearing all this, how do the people react? Well, the prophecy actually anticipates their response, and it reveals this deep, profound spiritual blindness. They just can't see their own condition. In verse 10, it's predicted that the people will ask, why have the Lord pronounced this great evil against us? And that question, that claim of innocence, that's the most damning evidence against them. It shows you a culture where sin had become so normal, they couldn't even see it anymore. To them, the judgment feels totally unfair because rebellion had just become their way of life.
But God gives them a clear and devastating answer. The verdict points directly to a long and worsening history of rebellion against the very foundation of their covenant with Him.
Verse 11 lays out the core sin, idolatry. And it's so important to understand this wasn't just ignorance. The source material describes it as a willful abandonment of God, because their fathers have forsaken me. Historically, this kind of idolatry exploded under kings like Manasseh, whose reign had permanently corrupted Judah's religion, leading them to serve and worship all sorts of other gods.
Then verse 12 delivers this devastating comparison. The charge isn't just that they repeated their father's sins. The charge is, ye have done worse than your fathers. I mean, despite countless warnings from prophets, they chose deliberate rebellion, with each person just walking after the imagination of his evil heart.
And so, verse 13 delivers the final, unavoidable consequence: exile. Therefore will I cast you out of this land into a land that ye know not. This is a direct fulfillment of warnings laid out centuries earlier in Deuteronomy. And here's the tragic irony. The people who chose to serve other gods in the promised land will now be forced to serve them day and night in a foreign land with no access to God's favor. And this prophecy was fulfilled with chilling precision. The people of Judah were forcibly removed from their homes, deported to Babylon after the final destruction of Jerusalem, just as Jeremiah had warned them. So, just to recap the historical timeline, this whole process started around 606 BC with that first wave of deportations. A second wave followed in 597, and by 586 BC, Jerusalem was in ruins, and the exile was complete. Jeremiah's prophetic word had become historical fact. This whole account just leaves us with a really provocative question to chew on. When a society's most fundamental ceremonies, the weddings that celebrate the future and the funerals that honor the past, when they just fall silent, what does that really reveal about its very foundation?